When you work in Google Sheets, you may find that there is a time when you want to add something in the header, maybe the name of the file or the company name. And maybe you want to add something in the footer, say a page number or a date of when this particular spreadsheet was created or is being printed. And to do that, of course, we need to look at headers and footers in Google Sheets. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at Google Sheets and headers and footers. Looking at our example spreadsheet, we can see that it's sort of just the shell of the information that we need to put in if we have a payroll of some kind, and perhaps just a few employees, maybe even just ourselves. And you can tell in column A that it's only going to go for 2 weeks, and then we figure out what that check would be and pay our employee. And then to the right of column A, we can see that in row 2 we have headings for when you start in the morning, and actually in E, when you leave at the end of the shift, and there's time allotted for leaving for lunch and coming back. And I haven't even put in totals because that's not really what we're looking for today. As we set up this little payroll schedule, one of the things that we want to do is to be sure to add in some information that no matter when and where I print, it's always going to have things like a page number or a date. And so to do that, we can go to the toolbar, to the third button here, which is print, and it even tells us that the keyboard shortcut for print is Control P, so we could do that. Or we can go to File in the menu bar, then come all the way down to Print. Again, to the right of print, we have that reminder that we could also use Control P, but we'll just click on Print here. And this takes us to a print preview. And right now I can see how that 2-week schedule is going to look, but I also see that there is nothing in the header at the top of the page or in the footer at the bottom of the page. To change that, we need to come over to the right where we have this pane, and right now it's the very last choice, headers and footers, and we'll go to the right to that down arrow, the down caret, and click. And then we can scroll down and add in the choices that we want to make. So if I want to add in page numbers, I would simply check that box. These are going to be preset locations, so when I look at page numbers, I can see down at the far right of the page, I now have a 1. I might want to put in the workbook title. So if I do that, I will also check the box. And the preset location for that is in the upper left, where I've named this particular workbook headers and footers. Now I might also want to add in the sheet name, so I could click on that box. And the sheet name is in the upper right corner where it says Sheet 1. And then going on down in this list, I could add the current date, so let's click on that. And it shows up in the lower left. And then I could also add in the current time. And when I check it, we can see that it just went to the right of the current date. Now, if I decide that I don't really need the workbook title, for example, I could uncheck it, and it disappears in the upper left. Same thing with the sheet name. If I only have one sheet in a workbook, it doesn't really make sense to have the sheet name, so I'm going to turn that off as well. But I've still retained the footer information at the bottom, which is date and time and page number. Now, I might also decide that while the date is nice, I don't really need the time. And so I have the date on the left, the lower left, and the page number in the lower right. When you work with printing, then the other thing that we would do is go up to the right to the next button, click on it, And then it gives us just a reminder of how that's going to look. And then I would choose the printer and if I want to print in color and that kind of thing. But for me today, I'm going to cancel. Now let's look at another way to add in information on your headers and footers where you don't have just an automatic preset location. So again, I'm just in my kind of blank spreadsheet that I've just set up, and I'm going to go to File and Print. And I went in and removed anything on the headers and footers. So as we go to the right and we find headers and footers like we did last time, and we click on this drop down arrow, we can use the scroll bar to come below those default settings that we checked before, the page numbers, the workbook title, sheet name, current date, and time, and come down to Edit Custom Fields and select that instead. Now this is really kind of interesting in that right in the middle here it says, well, here's where your content is going to be. Okay, thank you. And it hasn't even picked up on the content that I have actually put into this worksheet. So it's more of, say, an editing view where the data that I've put in isn't necessary in this particular view. Okay, so now starting in the upper left, it says click to add text. Interesting. Well, let's click, and we have 4 buttons. So the very first one here, when I hover my mouse, says page number. I don't think I want my page number in the upper left. Well, let's look at this one. It says title. Oh, well, I might want to put the title of my workbook here, maybe. Here is, if I can hover over it, date. Oh, well, that might be a good place to put that. And then also we have time. So we have those 4 options that it will pick up automatically, but it will place it in the upper left, sort of in the center, or in the top right. Or we have those same buttons when we come to the lower left, the central bottom location, and to the lower right. So we have those 4 choices that we can put in either the header or the footer. Let's see. Let's put in, since we only have 4, let's put in the title. This is kind of fun because we have a choice of either the workbook title or the sheet name. Let's go with workbook title. And then I'm going to just kind of give the middle part here a skip, at least for now. So where it says click to add text on the right, I can click. We get the very same buttons that we had before. Let's go with title again, and this time put in the sheet name. Let's come down to the lower left and click where it says click to add text. And our third button here is date. So let's click on that drop down. And there are 12 different date formats that we can choose from. I'm not too picky here. I think I'm just going to pick the first one. And it didn't really put in the literal date. It's saying this is a field because it has those square brackets around it, and it says date. So as I open and close this file, it will put in a current date. Now let's come to the lower right, and let's go to that page number. And I have 3 options of page numbers, either just a 1 by itself, the word page spelled out, or page abbreviated. So let's go to this central footer location, click where it says click to add text, and go to the last button in this little toolbar, which is time. And we have 4 time format choices as well. I like 12-hour time, so I'm going to go time 2. It has the square bracket and it just says time 2. It's using the name of that format. And when we have finished setting up this page the way we want to, we can go to the upper right and click on Confirm. As we look at this, here's the workbook name, here's the worksheet name. Down at the bottom right, we have the page, we have the time, and we have the date, just as we set it up. And then, of course, normally we would go to Next in the very upper right, and we would select our printer and print. But again, I'm going to cancel. What happens if you decide that you would like to remove, say, the workbook name or the sheet name? You decide that they aren't really needed, they aren't necessary, and may even be sort of private enough that you don't want to share that information. What we can do is go to the toolbar and go to Print. And as I look at this print preview, it has all of the fields that we selected. But as we go over to the right and we make our selection here of headers and footers, and we click that drop down arrow, well, we can see that we have check boxes for everything that we've put in the headers and footers. Well, let's say that we want to remove workbook title. I can click on that box to uncheck it, and it has disappeared from the header. And then the sheet name, I could click on that, and it removes that. Now, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and go to the upper right to Next, where we would, if we were going to print this, print it, but we're going to come down to Cancel, and then we're going to go back to Print to see if it actually kind of stuck, if it's set in stone. So we'll go to Print, and yes, sure enough, those edits that we've made are now set. Now there is another way, and I've found that if for whatever reason the check boxes aren't working for me, here's something else that I can do. I can go to Headers and Footers, that last choice on the right-hand side, and come down to Edit Custom Fields and click on that. And again, we see the content area, and in the lower left, in the footer, we see the date, but I can click and simply backspace out of that field, so that when I click off and kind of into the content area, you can see that it just says click to add text. And then I can click in that field that's in the center of the footer and backspace it out. And again, I'm just going to click to make sure that the information in that box has changed to click to add text. And then one more click in the far right of that footer, and I'm going to backspace out of it. And then in the upper right, you have that Confirm button, so we'll click on it. And I really think that sometimes what you need to do to make sure that you have followed all of the required steps is to go to Next in the upper right, and then you don't really even need to select a printer, but if you're going to print, of course you would. Notice that in our print preview now, the header and the footer are clear of all information, and then generally if you were going to print, you would click Print. We're going to cancel. Now let's go back and check. So I'm just going to go to File and Print this time, and our header and footer are both clear of any kind of fields that we have added in. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, Learning Express Library, and Udemy Business. We also premiere 2 new videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel. From there, be sure to look for our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist, which contains all of our tech videos.